Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by his statement that by early 2010, New Zealand will be coming out of the recession, quote unquote, reasonably aggressively?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I stand by my full quote from March 2009, which is, I think by the end of 2009, early 2010, this time next year, we'll be starting to come out of that, I think actually starting to come out reasonably aggressively. I'm more optimistic about 2011 than 2010, but nevertheless I think 2010 will be positive. Mr. Speaker, those statements have proved to be absolutely, entirely, 100% correct.
Mr. Speaker, 2 years into his government, does he take responsibility for the economic results that came out today that were much worse than Treasury estimated 6 months ago, or will he continue to blame everybody else for his failure?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, well, I can't take responsibility for a global financial crisis, although Michael Cullen once blamed me for it. I can't take responsibility for an earthquake. I actually can take responsibility for doing something about leaky homes. That government did absolutely nothing for homeowners. And I can take responsibility that New Zealand's had the best tax switch it's had in 25 years, Mr. Speaker.
Question, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Will he then take responsibility for the fact that a large part of that deficit was because this economy has not performed under his management over the last 6 months, as Treasury says?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad we're coming into the Christmas period because maybe Phil Goff can take a holiday, even if it won't be supported by a 90% discount.
Point of order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, you know that people can't start with that sort of gratuitous attack on somebody asking the question.
Order.
He must address the question.
A point of order was called. I accept the basis of the member's point of order. The only issue is, though, he may recollect that in his previous supplementary, he it was fairly blatantly political. I think seemed to recollect him saying something about the Prime Minister's failure. And then that supplementary question he asked just now was more of a statement than a supplementary question. And where members make political statements, there's limit to how much I can control the ministers in answering them with political statements. Although I would ask the Prime Minister to come to the substance of the statement as quickly as possible, please. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallett.
Mr. Speaker, does he take responsibility for the statement?
Well, the members stopped just when the statement started, and I seem to remember what followed was a fairly loaded statement. And I mean, there are plenty of speakers' rulings that indicate that there are devices that are used to try and turn a statement into a question. Some previous speakers didn't allow them, but I do. But I would ask the Prime Minister please to come to the substance of the statement in his answer. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, New Zealand's economic position relative to Ireland, Greece, Spain, Portugal, the UK, the United States of America, most of the European Union and all of the OECD is in a stronger position. So no, Mr. Speaker, I can't take responsibility for a global financial crisis, but thank goodness we've got a leadership team that is taking New Zealand out of these difficult conditions.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, supplementary. When looking at the blowout in the government's deficit of $2.5 billion over the last 6 months, how much of that deficit can be accounted for by tax cuts for the wealthy that now it's shown he is effectively borrowing to pay for?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, none.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister tell the House how successful have gimmicks like a cycleway and the Jobs Summit been in reducing unemployment and welfare rolls as a way of contributing to creating new jobs and cutting expenditure?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, very, and while I'm prepared to accept things aren't going brilliantly for the New Zealand economy, all I can say is they're going better than they are for the Labour Party.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, why did he yesterday describe the tax take as being slightly down when the reduction in corporate tax has been a massive 28% over the last 4 months from what was forecast? Isn't that the economy is failing?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no. If one looks at the way corporate taxes are paid, because they're paid on a provisional basis, everyone understands that even when the bad times initially come, corporate tax is higher, and then over a period of time it takes a while to catch up. The member will actually remember that under Labour's time, corporate taxes were much higher than anticipated.
Question. Beg your pardon, Rahui Katane.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, is he aware that the Children's Social Health Monitor released yesterday showed a dramatic rise in hospital admissions for Māori and Pacifica children for conditions with a social gradient over the last 2 years? And what actions will government take in a post-recession budget to protect the most vulnerable children from such hardship?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I haven't seen the document that the member is quoting from, but what I can say is the government is trying to tackle those issues through a variety of different mechanisms and areas. Whanaora would be one good example of that, where we are trying to get in and support families at the grassroots to make a difference for those vulnerable children.
Rahui Katane.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What consideration will he give to recommendations from the Māori Party, the Child Poverty Action Group and the Alternative Welfare Working Group for the in-work tax credit to be extended to all low-income families as an immediate support for families on benefits?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I think that's very unlikely, and the reason is the fiscal cost of that would be significant. When the policy was introduced by the then Labour government, it was brought in because there was a recognition that we always wanted to make sure that working paid, and the in-work tax credit recognises that, and the national opposition at the time supported that.
Question number 2, Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.